Alright, so now that we have the skin all done, by the way, if you notice that your paper kind of warps a bit, it kind of straightens out as the water dries out because the moisture obviously leaves, when it dries. So don't worry about that too much. So let's go ahead and get started with our ears. I forgot our hair and our ears because I forgot to do our ears. So all I'm really going to do is just make a simple wash over the ears. And that's pretty much it for the ears because I don't want to... These are most likely going to be in shadow anyway, so I'm just going to color them very, very simply. Kind of give a little bit of darkness around the inner parts of the ear. And that's it. So that's it for the ears, and then what we can do now is the hair. Now I'm kind of going for more of a brownish hair color because I kind of like that. I think it's very authentic looking, kind of like a brunette. So I'm going to go ahead and once again wash this whole entire thing with water. I'm going to use the top part first. So don't worry about it being too wet. You need it to be wet so that the color can really spread nicely. So I'm just going to be doing the top part first, such as the bangs and a bit of the, the upper parts here. So I'm going to be doing up to about here. So once everything's wet, what we can do is carefully fill it in with the color of our choice. So I always like to start off with a lighter brown. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take my number 97. This is going to be our hair section here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm going to show you what colors I'm going to use. I'm going to use my 97. I'm going to take my 71 and kind of use this as a nice wash. So I will cover this all with this color first. And because this is wet, it's easy to apply. Notice how soft it looks because it's wet on wet. And just, as you continue using this color, just make sure you keep spreading it. If you run out, just make more. So this is almost kind of like a little strawberry blonde hair, which I actually kind of like. That's actually kind of cute. So this is the lightest part that I'm going to do, the lightest wash. Once again, it's always a base. And we're also going to be, adding highlights and everything and the like. So yes, this may look like a bit of the skin tone at first. Be careful and try not to paint on the face too much. But for now, this is just a light wash. It may look like skin tone for now, but we're going to darken this. So it's not really going to look all that, it's not going to look the same later on. It's going to look a little bit different. Although I could technically make her blonde like this. That would actually be really, really cute. So the top is pretty much all blocked in. Now let's wait for this to I don't have to wait for this to dry yet. I could just add a little bit more pigment. But I'm going to use my thin brush this time just to add some little details here and there. So I'm going to take a number 194 here. It's kind of a dark brown. And I'm going to mix it in with my mixture here. So I'm going to mix my 197 first. Then I'm going to mix in my 194. And that'll give me a nice brown tone. So in this case, what I will do... Actually, I'm going to make a sort of a medium tone first. And then I'll make darker tones later. I actually really like this blonde color. I like bold, so I kind of like, light skin, and then, at least when it comes to this piece, I like dark hair and fair skin because it kind of gives a nice contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a medium tone for now, just kind of so it can blend in better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of value on here. I'm also going to use this chance to kind of mark out my medium tones and my highlights. So adding, these little areas here will be great. So I'm just going to spread this color around. This is our middle tone. So this brush is really nice because it kind of gives a nice kind of details. And it's not too thick where it kind of distracts. Of course, I'm going to take a piece of paper, rip it out, and just kind of blot these areas out. Because this is still a little bit wet, I'm going to be a little bit careful with how I spread the color. So as I'm adding more color, I'm also just kind of also adding, areas where I'm going to add my highlights. So I'm going to kind of make my highlights a little bit more like watery looking. What I mean by that is kind of like more like jello looking. So I'm going to just add a little bit more of my darker mix, slightly darker mix. I'm just going to continue, adding my tones. And also kind of adding little bits of value here and there too. So I waited for this to dry just a little bit because it was actually being a little bit fussy. So be sure to wait a little bit when you're doing this because then you can get cleaner lines when it comes to adding highlights and stuff. So if you want to do that, go ahead and wait. So I'm adding a little bit of tint around the ends of her hair as well. Adding some more color, just kind of replenishing my mix. And a little bit of water just to kind of dilute it a little bit, and not to make it overly saturated. So adding bits of color and leaving some color for the highlights. So notice how I made this underside a little bit darker than this strand here. That's because I want to make that stand out a little bit. So you want to also play with your values a little bit. Anything that's kind of underneath other strands, you want to make a little bit darker. And that's the key to making really, really pretty hair. What you guys can also do is look at some reference of your favorite artists and try to kind of imitate their style just to learn, of course. Not claim it as yours, duh. But just to learn from them, do a study. And that will actually help you improve a lot more. Studies are always, always important, because that just helps you learn how the masters do it. So if you guys are just like, oh, but I want to do my own style, yeah, that's totally fine. But I feel like, learning from other styles first and then kind of make your own is a good way to go. So as you can see, I'm kind of just like, lightening up areas that I feel would have nice highlight, especially around the rims here, around the bangs. So you can reactivate more colors by making them wet, but when it's on paper, you know, it's hard to do that. Now with gouache, if you use gouache, which is a kind of like a mix between acrylic and watercolor, you can rehydrate your paint that's on your paper already. So that's an only downside, is that if you already have a color that you don't want to mix, you know, you're gonna have to deal with that. But when it comes to watercolor, you can't really reconstitute existing color that's on the paper because it's already dried. So you can still blend a little bit, but you can't really use that color again and paint more on it. So I'm coloring the insides of this. And I'm coloring the back a lot darker. So this will be mainly pretty dark. Moving these strands a little bit lighter just so that they stand out a bit more. I think this color is just so cute. It's like a nice strawberry blonde, like a light version of it, and I really like it. But I really like as well the I'm just more biased towards like dark hair because it just shows the face a lot better. But maybe I'll change my mind. Right now this is just blending too much with the skin unless I add even darker colors. But oh well. So I'm just gonna fill the rest in with my darks. This got a little bit too dark, but it's okay. I can always water it down and spread it to the other strands. I got a bit of hair in there. It's probably a brush hair. It's a lot shorter. It's not my hair. So here is the end here, the braid. And there is our second layer. So let's see what that looks like from far away. Looking pretty good. And I will do the second part of the hair after I finish with this part. So now I'm just gonna wait for that to dry. Alright, now that this is dry enough where I can basically, you know, layer on another bit of color, I am going to make the even darker value now. I really love this color. It's so cute. Maybe I will make a dark, like just a slightly darker version of it. So I am going to take my 97 again. We're just going to be using similar colors, just a little bit darker. So I'm going to take this, mix it in with my red here, or with my orange. I'm going to mix in my 194, which is that nice dark brown. I'm going to use this as another color here, or like a darker tone. So I'm just going to be putting in dark, deep areas, you know, such as little corners, kind of pushing some of the hair back in some areas. So I like to add this dark, this really, really nice dark towards the back, because that's usually where less light goes through. So as you can see, the dark versus the light, it looks a lot more like rich in tone. But then again, that's because I don't have as much colors layered on yet. But so I'm just going to be filling the rest of these with a little bit of this dark brown. Now try to make sure not to get it on the skin. If you get it on the skin, just kind of blot it out. And that's why I like this brush, because it's kind of nifty. It's thin and it's nimble. Just adding more layers of color inside. Adding some shadows over different strands works really well. If I want to hide some strands, I'm going to hide it with the shadows. If I'm going to pull out more strands, I'm going to make sure that there's light versus dark contrasts and the like. So areas like this, I want to make it dark because I want this to stand out against the face. I'm going to make more of this value here. I'm also going to add a little bit of this dark, really, really dark area underneath the rose. And underneath some sides of the hair. So notice how, I push and pull different values to make some strands stand out. If you want to blend, make it a little bit wet so that it doesn't have to be super, deep cut in the lines. It takes a lot of work to layer all these colors, but the weight is worth it because you get to see your pieces, kind of start becoming more alive the more time you put into it. There. I'm going to make this strand a little bit extra dark so it can be so it won't be confused with the skin. Spread that color in here as well. I'm also going to add a little bit of strands up here. I like also adding dark areas in like little crevices because that's usually where a lot of light doesn't really pass. Once more, I'm just remaking the colors just so I have more in stock. Adding these soft, not really soft colors, but I'm adding more of these colors into the hair. I'm going to add a little bit of this brown onto the braids. So it looks a little bit dark, or it's a little bit light here. So look how nice that looks when you start blending all these colors really nice and softly. You can also add more strands into the hair as well with your colors. Don't mind the background noise. I'm just going to color the back a little bit darker so that the neck gets pushed out, or the skin and the face gets pushed out rather than just blend in with the hair. There. So as you can see, dark versus light, it definitely pops out. nice touch. There. So looking good, getting a little bit darker. Not as dark as I want, but I think maybe I will just settle with this kind of color. Unless I make like, I guess I will settle with this color. I love this color so much. I'm going to add a little bit more darkness along these crevices here. Just to kind of separate these little bumps. These little hair bumps here. So I'm just going to separate them just so it looks a little bit clearer. That looks better. And separate this strand from this one. So I will wait for that to dry and then I will move on to the next step.